Sometimes the hardest thing in life isn't losing everything. It's finding the courage to start over when you're not sure you deserve a second chance. At 60 years old, Clay Dawson was a man with nothing left but regrets and a pickup truck that barely ran. He'd spent his last dollar on an abandoned ranch in Wyoming, hoping to disappear into the wilderness and live out his days alone. But when he walked through the door of that old cabin, he found something he never expected. A young, pregnant woman hiding in the back room, scared and alone. Her name was Lily, and she had nowhere else to go. What would a broken-down cowboy and a frightened girl running from her past possibly have to offer each other? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The truck's engine coughed twice before falling silent in the overgrown driveway. Clay Dawson sat behind the wheel for a long moment, his weathered hands still gripping the cracked leather steering wheel, staring at what he'd just purchased with the last of his money. The cabin looked worse than the photographs had suggested. Much worse. Pine needles covered the sagging porch roof. The windows were dark with grime and years of neglect. The barn listed to one side, like an old drunk leaning against a lamppost. Beyond the buildings, the land stretched toward the tree line in waves of brown grass and sage, beautiful in its emptiness, promising nothing but solitude. That was exactly what Clay wanted. Solitude. Distance from the mistakes that had followed him for the better part of 4 decades. He was 60 years old as of last Tuesday. Nobody had called. Nobody had sent a card. His ex-wife, Marie, had stopped acknowledging his birthday 20 years ago, and his daughter, Emma, well. Emma hadn't spoken to him in so long he wasn't entirely sure she remembered what he looked like anymore. The last time he'd seen her, she'd been 17, standing in the driveway of their old house in Cheyenne, tears streaming down her face as she told him she never wanted to see him again. She'd kept that promise. Clay pulled the property deed from the glove compartment and unfolded it carefully. The paper was already creased from the number of times he'd looked at it over the past week, making sure it was real, that he hadn't imagined this one last chance. 47 acres in the Medicine Bow National Forest, sold as is for what amounted to pocket change by modern standards. The realtor had been honest, at least. The place needed work. A lot of work. But it had a roof, 4 walls, and more importantly, it was hours from the nearest town. Nobody would bother him here. Nobody would ask questions about where he'd been or what he'd done with his life. He could live out whatever years he had left in peace, tending to the land, fixing what could be fixed, and leaving the rest to rot alongside him. He climbed out of the truck, his knees protesting the movement. Rodeo had been hard on his body. 30 years of bulls and broncs had left him with a collection of old injuries that announced themselves every morning, a shoulder that ached when it rained, ribs that never quite healed right, a lower back that felt like broken glass whenever he bent over. He'd been good once, real good. People in the circuit had known his name. Clay Dawson, the kid from Wyoming who could ride anything with 4 legs and a bad attitude. But talent only got you so far when you spent your winnings on whiskey and your nights in bars instead of at home with your family. The porch steps groaned under his weight. He pulled the key from his pocket, an old brass thing that looked like it belonged to a different century, and fitted it into the lock. The door swung open with a long, mournful creak. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and mouse droppings and years of abandonment. A layer of grime covered everything. The main room held a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with an ancient propane stove, and a wooden table with 2 chairs. To the left, a narrow hallway led to what he assumed were bedrooms. To the right, a door that probably opened to a bathroom. Clay set his duffel bag on the table and looked around. It wasn't much, but it was his. All his. The first thing he'd truly owned since he'd sold the ranch in Cheyenne to pay off his debts 15 years ago. He spent the next hour unloading the truck. He didn't have much. Clothes, mostly. A few books he'd picked up at a thrift store, a coffee maker that had seen better days, his grandfather's saddle, cracked and worn but too precious to leave behind, a toolbox filled with wrenches and screwdrivers and other implements he'd need to make this place livable. By the time he finished, the sun had started its descent toward the mountains. Long shadows stretched across the overgrown yard. Clay stood on the porch, breathing in the cold air, feeling something close to contentment for the first time in years. This was right. This was what he needed. He went back inside and decided to explore the rest of the cabin before darkness fell completely. The bathroom was small but functional. An old clawfoot tub, a sink with rust stains, a toilet that probably still worked. The first bedroom was empty except for a metal bed frame and a dresser with drawers that stuck when he tried to open them. The second bedroom door was closed. Clay turned the handle and pushed. The door resisted, catching on something. He pushed harder, and it swung inward with a scrape. The room was dark, the single window covered with a blanket nailed to the frame. Clay fumbled for a light switch, found none, and pulled out the small flashlight he kept in his pocket. The beam swept across the room and stopped on a figure pressed into the far corner. A young woman stared back at him, eyes wide with fear, one hand pressed protectively over her swollen belly. For a moment, neither of them moved. Clay's heart hammered against his ribs. The woman looked like she might bolt, but there was nowhere for her to go. She was trapped between him and the wall, her breathing quick and shallow. "I'm sorry," Clay said, raising his free hand slowly, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "I didn't know anyone was here." The woman didn't respond. She couldn't have been more than 25, maybe younger. Her dark hair hung in tangles around her shoulders. She wore a flannel shirt several sizes too large and jeans that looked like they'd been slept in for days. Her face was pale, thin, drawn with exhaustion or fear, or both. "I'm Clay," he continued, keeping his voice soft and steady, the way he used to talk to spooked horses. "I just bought this place. The realtor said it was abandoned." Still nothing. The woman's eyes darted toward the door, then back to him, calculating. "Are you hurt?" Clay asked. "Do you need help? Please don't call the police." The words came out in a rush, desperate and raw. "Please. I'll leave. I'll go right now. Just give me a minute to get my things." Clay lowered the flashlight so it wasn't pointing directly at her face. "Hold on now. Nobody said anything about police. I just want to know if you're all right." The woman's hand moved to her belly again, a gesture so instinctive and protective that Clay felt something twist in his chest. He thought of Emma, of the way Marie used to rest her hand on her stomach when she was pregnant, that same fierce maternal instinct even before the baby was born. "When are you due?" he asked gently. The woman's eyes filled with tears. 6 weeks, maybe 7. I'm not exactly sure. "And you've been staying here? In this cabin?" She nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Just for a few weeks. The door was unlocked and nobody had been here in forever, so I thought I didn't think anyone would mind. I didn't take anything. I've been real careful." Clay looked around the room. In the flashlight's beam, he could see her makeshift camp, a sleeping bag on the floor, a backpack, a few bottles of water, some granola bar wrappers. She'd been living here like a ghost, trying to stay invisible. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily." She said it so quietly he almost didn't hear. "Lily," Clay repeated. "All right, here's what we're going to do. You're going to stay right here for now, and I'm going to go to the kitchen and make us some coffee. Then we're going to sit down and talk about this like reasonable people. Does that sound fair?" Lily looked at him suspiciously, but she nodded. Clay backed out of the room slowly, leaving the door open so she wouldn't feel trapped. His hands were shaking as he walked down the hallway. Of all the things he'd expected to find in this cabin, a pregnant woman hiding in the back bedroom hadn't even made the list. He filled the old percolator with water from the tap, praying the well still worked. It sputtered and coughed, but water came out, rust-colored at first, then clearing. He measured coffee grounds into the pot and set it on the propane stove, lighting the burner with a match. While the coffee brewed, he tried to think. The smart thing would be to call someone, social services maybe, or a shelter in Jackson. But Lily had begged him not to call the police, and there was something in her eyes that told him she had good reason to be afraid. He thought of Emma again. If she were in trouble, if she were pregnant and scared and hiding in an abandoned cabin in the middle of nowhere, he'd want someone to help her. He'd want someone to show her kindness instead of just following the rules. The coffee finished brewing. Clay poured 2 cups and carried them down the hallway. Lily was standing now, her backpack slung over one shoulder, clearly ready to run. "I made coffee," Clay said, holding out one of the cups. "It's not great coffee, but it's hot." Lily hesitated, then sat down, her backpack, and took the cup with both hands, wrapping her fingers around it like she was trying to absorb its warmth. "Come on," Clay said. "Let's sit at the table. We should talk." They walked to the main room in silence. Clay pulled out one of the chairs for her, and she sat down slowly, carefully, the way pregnant women do when their center of gravity has shifted. He took the other chair and sipped his coffee, waiting. "I'm not a criminal," Lily said finally. "I know how this looks, but I'm not. I didn't say you were. I just needed somewhere to stay, somewhere quiet, somewhere nobody would find me." Her voice cracked on the last word. Clay set down his cup. "Who are you hiding from, Lily?" She looked at him for a long moment, weighing whether to trust him. Then she said, "The baby's father. He's not a good man. When I told him I was pregnant, he said I had to get rid of it. When I refused, She stopped, her jaw tightening. "I left. I took what I could carry and I left. And I've been moving ever since. I can't go back. I won't." Clay nodded slowly. He'd known men like that. Hell, he'd been friends with men like that back in his rodeo days. Men who saw women as possessions, who couldn't stand the idea of someone saying no to them. "Does he know where you are?" "No. I've been careful. No phone, no credit cards, nothing he could trace. I worked under the table at a diner in Idaho for a while, saved up some money. Then I came here. I was going to keep moving, find another town, another job, but—" She touched her belly again. "I'm so tired. I just needed to rest for a little while." Clay looked at this young woman sitting across from him, alone and pregnant and running from a man who wanted to hurt her, and he made a decision that would have surprised anyone who knew him. "You can stay," he said. Lily's eyes widened. "What? You can stay here? In the cabin? At least until you figure out your next move? I don't understand. Why would you do that?" Clay thought about how to answer. He could tell her about Emma, about how he'd failed his own daughter, and maybe this was a chance to do something right for once. But that felt too heavy, too much to lay on a stranger. "Because you need help," he said simply. "And I've got a spare bedroom. Doesn't seem all that complicated to me." Lily stared at him, and Clay saw her walls beginning to crack, the careful armor she'd built around herself starting to give way to something that looked like hope. "I can pay rent," she said quickly. "Not much, but I have a little money saved. And I can cook and clean and help fix up the place. I'm good with my hands. I can earn my keep." "We'll figure all that out later," Clay said. "For now, why don't you get settled properly? There's a bed frame in the other room. I can bring in a mattress from the truck. I've got an extra one I picked up at the thrift store. And tomorrow we can drive into town, get you some proper food and supplies." "I can't go into town. Someone might see me. The nearest town is almost 2 hours from here, population maybe 300. I doubt anyone there knows you or cares who you are. But if it makes you feel better, I can go alone. You can make me a list." Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means." Clay stood and picked up his coffee cup. "Get some rest. You look like you need it." He walked to the door and looked out at the darkening sky. Behind him, he heard Lily moving down the hallway, heard the sound of her unpacking her few belongings in what was now her room. What had he just done? He'd come here to be alone, to escape, to live out his remaining years in solitude. Now he had a pregnant woman under his roof, a woman running from danger, and he'd just promised to protect her. But as he stood there in the doorway, watching the first stars appear above the mountains, Clay realized something. For the first time in 20 years, he didn't feel quite so empty. He had a purpose again. Someone needed him. Maybe this was exactly what he'd been looking for all along, even if he hadn't known it. The first week passed in a careful dance of boundaries and unspoken rules. Clay rose before dawn, made coffee, and left a cup on the kitchen table for Lily before heading outside to assess the property. Lily stayed mostly in her room, emerging only when she thought he was occupied elsewhere. They were two strangers orbiting each other, polite but distant, neither quite sure how to navigate this unexpected arrangement. Clay spent his days working on the barn, trying to shore up the walls before winter arrived in earnest. The physical labor felt good, familiar. It gave him something to focus on besides the strange situation he'd found himself in. He'd come here to be alone, and now he was sharing his space with someone who needed silence as much as he did. There was something oddly comforting about that. On the 8th morning, everything changed. Clay was replacing rotted boards on the barn's south wall when he heard the sound of an engine coming up the long driveway. He straightened, his back protesting, and watched as a white sedan emerged from the tree line. His stomach tightened. Nobody should know he was here yet. He hadn't told anyone where he was going. The car stopped next to his truck. A man stepped out, middle-aged, wearing slacks and a button-down shirt that seemed out of place in the wilderness. He looked around the property with an expression that Clay couldn't quite read, part curiosity, part calculation. "Can I help you?" Clay called out, walking toward the cabin. The man turned and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm looking for someone. A young woman, early 20s, dark hair, pregnant. I was told she might have been seen in this area." Every muscle in Clay's body tensed. He kept his face neutral, his voice steady. "Haven't seen anyone matching that description. It's just me, out here." The man's smile widened. "Is that right? Mind if I look around? I've driven a long way." "I do mind, actually. This is private property. You're trespassing." The smile disappeared. "The woman I'm looking for is my fiancée." She's confused, not thinking clearly because of her condition. She needs proper medical care, someone to look after her. "I'm just trying to bring her home where she belongs." Clay recognized the tone. He'd heard it before in 100 different bars from 100 different men who thought they owned the women in their lives. Smooth and reasonable on the surface, with something hard and mean underneath. "Like I said, haven't seen her. Now I'd appreciate it if you'd leave." The man took a step closer. He was younger than Clay, stronger probably, but Clay had dealt with plenty of angry bulls in his time. He held his ground. "I don't think you understand the situation," the man said, his voice dropping lower. "Lily is carrying my child. She has no right to keep me from my own flesh and blood. If you're hiding her, you're making a very serious mistake." So this was him, the man Lily had been running from. Clay felt his hands curl into fists at his sides. "I told you I haven't seen anyone. You're not welcome here. Get back in your car and leave, or I'll call the sheriff and have you removed for trespassing." The man stared at him for a long moment, weighing his options. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "When you do see her, and I think we both know you will give her this, tell her Marcus is looking for her. Tell her I forgive her for running, but she needs to come home. For the baby's sake." He set the card on the hood of Clay's truck and walked back to his sedan. Before getting in, he looked at the cabin, his gaze lingering on the windows as if he could see through them. Then he drove away, the white car disappearing back down the driveway. Clay stood frozen until the sound of the engine faded completely. Then he turned and saw Lily standing in the doorway of the cabin, her face pale as snow, one hand pressed against the doorframe to steady herself. "You saw him," Clay said. "It wasn't a question." Lily nodded. Her whole body was shaking. Clay walked to the cabin, picking up Marcus's business card from the truck hood as he passed. He tore it in half, then in half again, and let the pieces fall to the ground. Inside, Lily had collapsed into one of the kitchen chairs. She was breathing hard, on the edge of panic. "He found me," she whispered. "I don't know how, but he found me." Clay poured her a glass of water and set it in front of her. "Drink this." Slow breaths. She tried, her hands shaking so badly she nearly spilled the water. Clay pulled out the other chair and sat down across from her. "How did he know to come here?" Lily asked. "I was so careful. I didn't use my phone, didn't use my cards, didn't tell anyone where I was going. Does he have connections? Money? Resources to hire? Someone to track you?" Lily nodded miserably. "His family owns a construction company. They have contracts all over the state. He knows people, cops, private investigators, all kinds of people." She looked up at Clay with desperate eyes. "I have to leave. Right now. If he knows I'm in this area, he'll come back. He'll bring others. He won't stop until he finds me." Clay thought about the man's face, the cold certainty in his eyes. She was right. Marcus would be back. "Where will you go?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. Somewhere else. Anywhere else. I'll figure it out. You're 7 months pregnant. You can barely walk without getting winded. Winter's coming. Where exactly do you think you're going to go?" Lily's face crumpled. "I don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." Clay stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains. He'd come here to hide from his own past, from his own failures. Now he was being asked to stand up for someone else, to put himself between a frightened woman and the man hunting her. The old Clay would have let her go, would have told himself it wasn't his problem, that he'd done enough just by giving her a place to stay for a week. The old Clay had spent his whole life taking the easy way out, avoiding conflict, running from responsibility. But he'd also spent the last 20 years living with the consequences of those choices, living with the knowledge that his daughter hated him because he'd never been there when she needed him, that his marriage had fallen apart because he'd cared more about the next rodeo, the next win, the next drink than he had about his family. He turned back to Lily. "You're not leaving." "What? You heard me. You're staying right here. I didn't tell that man anything, and I'm not going to. He can come back 100 times, and the answer will be the same. You don't understand what you're getting into. Marcus is dangerous. When he doesn't get what he wants, She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Clay pulled out his chair and sat down again, leaning forward so she could see his face clearly. "I'm 60 years old. I've been thrown by bulls, trampled by horses, beat up in more bar fights than I can count. I've made a mess of my life in just about every way a man can. But I'll tell you something, Lily. I'm done running. I'm done taking the easy way out. If this Marcus wants to come after you, he's going to have to go through me first." Lily stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "Why? Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." Clay thought about that. Maybe that's exactly why. Maybe this is my chance to do something right for once. To help someone who needs help, no questions asked. My daughter won't talk to me, and I can't blame her for that. But you're here, and you need someone in your corner. So that's where I'm going to be." Lily covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Clay sat there awkwardly, unsure what to do. Finally, he reached across the table and patted her shoulder, the way he might comfort a spooked animal. "We'll figure this out," he said. "I promise you that. But you're not facing this alone anymore." When Lily finally looked up, her eyes were red but clear. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." That night, Clay lay awake in his bedroom, staring at the ceiling. He'd made a commitment today that he couldn't take back. He'd put himself between Lily and whatever Marcus had planned, and he had no idea if he was strong enough, or smart enough, or brave enough to follow through. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Clay Dawson felt like his life meant something again, like he had a reason to get up in the morning besides just surviving another day. In the room down the hall, he could hear Lily moving around, probably unable to sleep as well. Two broken people under one roof, both running from the past, both hoping for something better. Clay closed his eyes and thought about tomorrow. We need to secure the property better. Make sure there were no easy ways for someone to approach unseen. He'd need to drive into town and talk to the local sheriff, feel out what kind of man he was, whether he could be trusted if things went bad. He'd need to prepare for the possibility that Marcus would come back, and next time he might not come alone. But tonight, Clay had made a promise, and this time he was going to keep it. The morning after Marcus's visit, Clay drove into town alone. Lily had wanted to come, restless from being cooped up in the cabin, but he'd insisted she stay hidden. Until he knew more about what they were dealing with, he couldn't risk her being seen. The town of Riverside consisted of a main street with perhaps a dozen buildings, half of them boarded up. There was a general store, a post office, a diner that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1972nd, and a small sheriff's office with a single patrol car parked outside. Clay pulled up in front of the general store and went inside. The woman behind the counter was probably 70, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. "Help you?" she asked, looking up from a crossword puzzle. "Need to stock up on supplies," Clay said. "Just moved into the old Fletcher place up past Copper Creek." Her eyebrows rose. "That old cabin? Hasn't been anyone out there in years. You're brave, taking that on. Or foolish. Haven't quite decided which yet." Clay grabbed a shopping basket and started filling it with canned goods, rice, beans, flour. He added fresh vegetables, eggs, milk, bread. Lily needed to eat properly, especially in her condition. The woman rang up his purchases, her eyes sharp and curious. "You out there all alone?" "Just me," Clay said, keeping his voice casual. "Looking for some peace and quiet." "Well, you'll find plenty of that. Not much happens around here. Sheriff Russo keeps things calm." She nodded toward the window. "That's his office right across the street if you ever need anything." Clay filed that information away. "He a good man, this sheriff? Good enough. Fair. Doesn't tolerate trouble. But he's not looking to create any either. Been sheriff here for 20 years. Clay paid for his groceries and loaded them into the truck. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he walked across the street to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Russo was a compact man in his late 50s, with grey hair, cropped military short, and eyes that missed nothing. He looked up from his desk as Clay entered. "Help you?" "Just wanted to introduce myself. Clay Dawson. I bought the Fletcher property up past Copper Creek." Russo stood and shook his hand. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. "Welcome to Riverside. That's quite a project you've taken on. Place has been empty a long time. I've noticed, but it's got good bones. I think I can make it work." They talked for a few minutes about the property, the weather, the coming winter. Clay kept it light, friendly, just a new neighbor making conversation. But he was watching Russo carefully, trying to get a sense of the man. Would he be someone Clay could trust if things went sideways with Marcus? Or would he be the type to ask too many questions, to dig into Lily's situation and make everything more complicated? "You out there by yourself?" Russo asked, echoing the question from the store clerk. "That's right. Looking forward to some quiet after too many years of crowds and noise." Russo nodded. "Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me. We don't get much trouble out here, but it never hurts to have a lawman's number just in case." Clay took the card Russo offered and tucked it into his wallet. As he turned to leave, Russo spoke again. "One more thing. Had a fellow come through yesterday, asking questions about a young woman. Said she was missing, might be in the area. You haven't seen anyone matching that description, have you? Clay's heart rate kicked up, but he kept his expression neutral. No, sir. Haven't seen anyone at all. Like you said, not much happens out here. Russo studied him for a moment, and Clay had the distinct impression the sheriff knew he was lying. But all Russo said was, "Fair enough. You have a good day now." Clay walked back to his truck, his mind racing. So Marcus had already been here, already talked to the sheriff. That complicated things. If Russo decided to investigate, to drive out to the cabin and look around, there would be no hiding Lily. He drove back to the ranch faster than he should have, the truck rattling over the rough road. When he pulled up to the cabin, he found Lily standing on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, despite the jacket she wore. "You were gone a long time," she said. "I was worried." Clay grabbed the grocery bags from the truck bed. "Met the sheriff. Marcus has already been to see him, asking questions." Lily's face went pale. "What did you tell him?" "Same thing I told Marcus. Haven't seen anyone." "But he's not stupid, Lily. If he decides to come out here and check, then we'll deal with it." Lily took one of the grocery bags from him, her jaw set with determination. "I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being scared all the time. If the sheriff comes, we'll tell him the truth. That I'm here by choice, that I'm safe, and that I don't want to be found." Clay followed her inside, impressed despite himself. "That's a different tune from yesterday. Yesterday I was panicking. Today I've had time to think." She started unpacking the groceries, moving around the kitchen with a familiarity that suggested she'd been doing more than hiding in her room all week. "I can't run forever. Eventually, I have to make a stand. And if I'm going to do that, this seems like as good a place as any." Clay set down the bags and pulled out his grandfather's pocket watch, a habit he'd had since he was young. He opened the case and checked the time, then closed. Hid again, feeling the weight of it in his palm. His grandfather had been a good man, honest and steady. The kind of man who kept his promises. "All right," Clay said. "Then we do this smart. We secure the property, make sure we can see anyone coming from a distance. We keep a low profile in town. We prepare for the possibility that Marcus comes back with more than just words." "You really think he'll come back?" "I know he will. Men like that don't give up easy." Clay looked at her seriously. "But neither do men like me. Not anymore." Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Clay would work outside during the day, repairing the barn, clearing brush from around the cabin to improve sightlines, checking the perimeter. Lily would work inside, cleaning, organizing, cooking meals that filled the cabin with smells Clay hadn't experienced in years. In the evenings, they'd sit at the kitchen table and eat together. The conversations were tentative at first, both of them feeling their way through the awkwardness of forced proximity. But gradually, they began to open up. Lily told him about growing up in a small town in Montana, about her mother who died when she was 16, about bouncing between foster homes until she aged out of the system. She'd met Marcus when she was working at a restaurant in Billings. He'd seemed charming at first, attentive, generous with gifts and compliments. By the time she realized what kind of man he really was, she'd already moved in with him. Clay told her about his rodeo days, about the wins and the losses and the years that blurred together in a haze of travel and competition. He told her about Marie and Emma, about how he'd let his family slip away because he'd been too selfish and too stubborn to see what really mattered. "Do you ever think about reaching out to your daughter?" Lily asked one evening. Clay turned his coffee cup in his hands. "Every day. But I wouldn't even know what to say. Sorry I missed your entire life." Doesn't quite cut it. Maybe she'd just want to know you're thinking about her, that you regret what happened, maybe. Or maybe she's better off without me stirring up old pain. He looked at Lily across the table. "What about you? Is there anyone you want to contact? Anyone who should know you're safe?" Lily shook her head. "No family left. And the friends I had, Marcus made sure I didn't keep them. He didn't like me having people in my life that he couldn't control." Clay felt anger rise in his chest again. How long were you with him? 3 years. The last year was... She stopped, touching her belly. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought maybe it would change things, make him soften. But it just made everything worse. He wanted to control the baby too, wanted to make all the decisions, tell me what I could and couldn't do. When I said I wanted to leave, he told me I'd never make it on my own. That I was nothing without him. You proved him wrong about that, Lily smiled, but it was sad. Did I? I'm hiding in a stranger's cabin, completely dependent on his kindness. That's not exactly independence. You survived. You kept yourself and your baby safe. That took more strength than most people have. Clay stood and collected their empty plates. Don't sell yourself short, Lily. You're tougher than you think. That night, as Clay lay in bed, he thought about the strange turn his life had taken. A month ago, he'd been drifting, purposeless, counting down the days until his body gave out, or his liver failed, or whatever end was waiting for him. Now he had something to protect, someone who needed him. It should have scared him. Instead, it felt right. 2 weeks passed without incident. The autumn days grew shorter and colder. Clay worked on winterizing the cabin, replacing broken window panes, sealing gaps in the walls, making sure the fireplace drew properly. In the evenings after dinner, he started working on a project in the barn. Lily discovered it on a Thursday afternoon when she brought him coffee. Clay had his back to the door, bent over his workbench, carefully sanding a piece of pine. Wood shavings covered the floor around his feet. "What are you making?" she asked. Clay straightened, wincing as his back protested. He turned, and she saw what lay on the bench, the beginnings of a cradle, small and delicate, the wood already taking shape under his careful hands. "Oh," Lily said softly. "Clay, you don't have to, I want to," he interrupted. "I'm not much good at a lot of things, but I know my way around woodwork. My grandfather taught me when I was a boy. Figured your baby should have something proper to sleep in." Lily set down the coffee and walked closer, running her fingers over the smooth wood. Her eyes were wet. "It's beautiful. It's not finished yet. Still needs the rockers attached, and I want to carve something into the headboard. Maybe some mountains or trees, something to remind them they came from Wyoming." "Them?" Lily smiled through her tears. "I don't even know if it's a boy or girl. Doesn't matter. Baby's going to need a cradle either way." They stood together in the quiet barn, the afternoon light slanting through the gaps in the walls, and something shifted between them. It was no longer just a temporary arrangement, no longer just a broke cowboy helping a stranger. This was becoming something more permanent, more real. "I felt the baby kick this morning," Lily said quietly. "Really strong, like they were trying to tell me something. That's good. Means they're healthy. Do you want to feel?" The question came out hesitant, uncertain. Clay hesitated, then nodded. Lily took his hand and placed it gently on her belly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he felt it, a small, firm push against his palm, like a tiny foot or fist testing the boundaries of its world. Clay's throat tightened. He remembered this feeling from when Marie was pregnant with Emma. Remembered the wonder of knowing there was a whole person in there, waiting to be born. He'd forgotten how magical it was, how it made everything else seem small and inconsequential. "Strong kid," he managed to say. Lily laughed, wiping at her eyes. "Tell me about it." "Keeps me up half the night with all the gymnastics." Clay pulled his hand back carefully. "You should probably be resting more. I can handle the work around here. I've been resting for weeks. I'm going stir-crazy." Lily looked around the barn. "What if I helped? I could hand you tools, clean up the wood shavings, something to feel useful." "You are useful. You keep the cabin running, cook meals that actually taste like food, instead of the garbage I was eating before you showed up. Still, I'd like to help with the cradle. If that's all right." Clay considered, then nodded. "All right, but you take breaks when you need them. And if your back starts hurting or you feel tired, you tell me." They worked together for the rest of this afternoon. Lily proved to be good company, handing him tools before he asked for them, asking questions about the woodworking process, telling him stories about her mother. Clay learned that Lily's mother had been a quilter, that she'd made beautiful patterns from scraps of old fabric, that she'd died too young from cancer that spread faster than anyone expected. "She would have liked you," Lily said at one point. "She always said you could tell a person's character by how they treated people who couldn't do anything for them in return." Clay didn't know what to say to that, so he focused on his work, carefully shaping the wood with hands that had known too much violence and too little creation. That evening, as they were finishing dinner, they heard a vehicle coming up the driveway. Clay was on his feet immediately, moving to the window. Lily froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. A pickup truck, older model, dark blue. Not Marcus's white sedan. Clay relaxed slightly but stayed alert. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out middle-aged, wearing jeans and a work jacket with red hair pulled back in a ponytail. She walked to the porch and knocked. Clay opened the door, keeping himself positioned to block the view inside. "Can I help you?" "Sorry to bother you," the woman said. Her voice was friendly but tired. "I'm Sarah Chen. I run the medical clinic in Riverside. Sheriff Russo mentioned you'd moved out here, thought I should introduce myself, let you know we're available if you need anything." "That's kind of you, but I'm doing fine." Sarah's eyes flicked past him, and Clay knew she'd seen Lily before he could stop her. She smiled. "I see. Well, the offer stands for both of you. We're small, but we're equipped to handle most situations. And we're discreet." Clay studied her face, trying to read her intentions. "The sheriff send you out here?" "No. I came on my own. Like I said, just wanted to introduce myself." She pulled a card from her pocket and held. "Put it out. My number's on there. Day or night, if you need medical help, you call. No questions asked." Clay took the card slowly. "Why would you do that?" Sarah's expression softened. "Because I've been doing this work for 15 years, and I've learned to recognize when someone needs help but is too afraid to ask for it. I don't know your story, and I'm not asking you to tell me. But if there comes a time when you need a doctor you can trust, I want you to know you have one." She turned to leave, then paused. "The baby's due soon, isn't it? Late January, early February?" Lily spoke from inside the cabin, her voice quiet but clear. "Early February, if everything goes right." Sarah nodded. "You'll want to start thinking about where you plan to deliver. The hospital in Jackson is good, but it's 3 hours away in good weather. Winter storms can make the roads impassable. My clinic isn't fancy, but I've delivered plenty of babies. You might want to consider it as an option." "We'll think about it," Clay said. "Thank you." After Sarah left, Clay and Lily stood in the kitchen, neither quite sure what to make of the visit. "Do you think she'll tell anyone?" Lily asked. "I don't know, but she seemed genuine. And she's right about the baby. We need to start thinking about what happens when you go into labor." Lily sat down heavily. "I haven't wanted to think about it. Every time I do, I panic. What if something goes wrong? What if Marcus finds out? What if—" "Hey." Clay pulled out the chair next to her and sat. "One thing at a time. First thing is making sure you and the baby are healthy. We can worry about the rest later." "I'm scared, Clay." "I know, but you're not alone. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Lily reached across the table and took his hand. Her grip was strong despite her fear. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. You don't need to thank me. This is—" Clay paused, searching for the right words. "This is the first time in 20 years I've felt like I'm doing something that matters. You gave me that. So if anyone owes thanks, it's me." They sat together in the quiet kitchen, holding hands across the table like the family neither of them had anymore, but both desperately needed. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Winter was coming, and with it, decisions that couldn't be postponed any longer. The first snow came in early November, light flurries that melted by afternoon, but promised heavier weather to come. Clay was splitting firewood behind the barn when he heard Lily calling his name, her voice sharp with urgency. He dropped the axe and ran. She was standing in the driveway, pointing toward the road. In the distance, barely visible through the trees, a white sedan was parked at the edge of the property line. "He's watching us," Lily said, her voice shaking. "He's been there for an hour." Clay squinted at the distant vehicle. "Stay inside. Lock the door. What are you going to do?" "Going to have a conversation." He climbed into his truck and drove down the long driveway. As he approached, the white sedan pulled away, disappearing down the mountain road. Clay followed for a few miles, but the car was faster and newer, and soon it was out of sight. When he returned to the cabin, Lily was pacing the kitchen, her arms wrapped protectively around her belly. "He knows I'm here," she said. "He's just waiting, watching, planning something." Clay poured them both coffee, his mind working through possibilities. "Maybe it's time to talk to the sheriff. Make it official that you're here by choice, that you don't want Marcus contacting you. And say what? That my ex-boyfriend is sitting on a public road? He's not breaking any laws. Not yet. But if we get ahead of this, establish a record, you don't understand." Lily's voice rose, panic bleeding through. "Marcus's family has money, connections. His uncle is a judge. His cousin works for the state attorney's office. If we involve the law, he'll twist it somehow. He'll make it look like I'm unstable, like I kidnapped his child. He'll take my baby." Clay had seen enough of the world to know she was probably right. Money and connections had a way of bending justice to fit whatever shape was convenient. "Then we do it differently," he said. "We document everything. Every time he shows up, we write it down. We take pictures if we can. We build our own record, so if it comes to it, we have proof of harassment." Lily nodded slowly. Okay, we can do that." That night, Clay couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, listening to the wind howl around the cabin, thinking about Marcus and what he might be planning. Eventually, he got up and went to the kitchen, intending to make coffee. Instead, he found himself drawn to the truck. He rummaged through the glove compartment until he found what he was looking for, a small cardboard box he'd been carrying around for years but never had the courage to open. Inside were letters, maybe 20 of them, all addressed to him in childish handwriting that grew more sophisticated over the years. Letters from Emma. He'd received them sporadically over the years, forwarded through his ex-wife, even after Emma stopped wanting to see him. Birthday cards. School achievements. A letter when she graduated high school, another when she started college. The last one had come 5 years ago, when she was 23, and it had simply said, "Dad, I'm getting married next month. I thought you should know. Don't come to the wedding. Emma." Clay had kept every single one, but he'd never responded. What could he say? How could he explain 20 years of absence, of choosing rodeo and whiskey over his own daughter? So he'd said nothing, and eventually the letters stopped coming. He sat in the cold truck, reading through them by flashlight. In the early ones, Emma talked about school, about her friends, about missing him. Later, the tone changed more, distant, more formal, as if she was writing to a stranger out of obligation rather than love. The final letter was cold, final, a door closing. Clay folded the letters carefully and put them back in the box. He couldn't fix what he'd broken with Emma. That ship had sailed and sunk long ago. But he could do right by Lily. He could be the kind of man his grandfather had been, the kind of man he should have been all along. The next morning, Clay drove into town while Lily stayed at the cabin. He needed supplies, but he also wanted to check in with Sheriff Russo, feel out whether Marcus had been making more inquiries. He found Russo having coffee at the diner, sitting in a back booth with a newspaper spread in front of him. "Mind if I join you?" Clay asked. Russo gestured to the opposite seat. "Free country. How's life at the Fletcher place?" "Good. quiet, how it should be. They ordered coffee from the waitress, a young woman who looked bored enough to sleep standing up. When she left, Russo folded his newspaper and looked at Clay directly. "I'm going to be straight with you, Dawson. That fellow who came through a few weeks back asking about the pregnant woman, he's been calling my office. Says he has reason to believe his fiancée is being held against her will somewhere in this area. Says she's not mentally stable, that she needs help." Clay kept his expression neutral. "That's so. I told him I hadn't seen anyone matching that description, but he's persistent. He's also well-connected. His family has lawyers who've been making noise about getting a warrant to search properties in the area. On what grounds? That's the thing. They don't have grounds, not real ones, but they're hoping if they make enough noise, someone will give them something to work with." Russo sipped his coffee. "Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Is there a young woman staying with you at that cabin?" Clay met Russo's eyes. "There. And is she there by choice?" "She is. She's running from an abusive situation. The man looking for her, Marcus, he's dangerous. She's scared of him, and she has good reason to be." Russo nodded slowly. "That's what I figured. Is she safe? Does she need help?" "She's safe with me. And yes, she could use help. Medical care, mostly. She's due in a few months. Dr. Chen mentioned she'd been out to see you. Said she got the impression you folks were in a tight spot." Russo leaned back. "Here's what I can do. I can keep telling Marcus's people that I haven't found anything. I can lose their paperwork for a while, slow down any warrant requests. But you need to understand, if they push hard enough, if they bring in enough lawyers, I won't be able to stall forever. I understand. And when that baby comes, there's going to be a birth certificate. There's going to be records. Those records can be used to establish paternity, to file for custody. You need to start thinking about how you're going to handle that." Clay hadn't thought that far ahead. "What do you suggest?" "Get her a lawyer. A good one. Establish her rights before Marcus does. Document everything, every threat. Every time he shows up uninvited, every piece of evidence that shows he's harassing her. Build a case for a restraining order. Make it official. She's afraid involving lawyers will just make things worse. It might, but doing nothing definitely will make things worse." Russo pulled out his wallet and threw some bills on the table for the coffee. "There's a family law attorney in Jackson, name's Patricia Morales. She's good, and she doesn't scare easy. Tell her I sent you. She'll work with you on fees if money's tight." "Why are you helping us?" Russo stood, putting on his hat. "Because I've been a cop for 30 years, and I've seen what happens when women don't get protection from men who think they own them. I've scraped too many of them off bathroom floors, written too many reports. That end with victim, declined to press charges. If I can help prevent one more of those reports, I'm going to do it." Clay watched him leave, then sat alone in the booth, thinking about everything Russo had said. The waitress refilled his coffee without asking. Outside, snow had started falling again, heavier this time. Clay needed to tell Lily about the lawyer, about the birth certificate and the custody battle that was almost certainly coming. But he also needed to give her hope, to show her they weren't just reacting but planning, building toward a future where she and her baby would be safe. He finished his coffee and headed back to the cabin. When he arrived, he found Lily in the barn, working on the cradle. She'd sanded the rockers smooth and was carefully fitting them into place. "I thought I'd help," she said, looking up with a tentative smile. "Hope that's okay." "More than okay." Clay set down the groceries and joined her at the workbench. "Lily, we need to talk about what comes next, about the baby, about Marcus, about making sure you're protected legally." She set down the sandpaper. "I know. I've been thinking about it too. I can't hide forever." "No, but we can fight smart. There's a lawyer in Jackson who might be able to help. And the sheriff is on our side, at least for now. Lily looked at the cradle, running her hand over the smooth wood. When I first came here, I thought I'd just stay a few days, get my strength back, then move on. But this place, what you've done for me, it feels like home. Like maybe I could actually build a life here. You can. We both can. Do you really think we can win against Marcus? Against his money and his family and all their connections? Clay thought about the letters from Emma, about all the years he'd wasted being afraid to try, afraid to fail. I think we have to try. And I think we've got a better shot than you might believe. You're stronger than you know, Lily. And you're not fighting alone anymore, she looked at him with tears in her eyes. Thank you, Clay, for everything. They stood together in the barn, the half-finished cradle between them, and Clay felt something he hadn't felt in decades: purpose, and the quiet determination to see it through. The drive to Jackson took 3 hours through winding mountain roads that grew treacherous as the snow accumulated. Clay drove carefully, Lily beside him in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. This was the first time she'd left the ranch since Marcus's appearance, and every car that passed made her tense. "You're sure about this?" she asked. For the third time. "I'm sure. Patricia Morales is good people, according to Russo, and we need to get ahead of this before Marcus makes his move." The law office was in a modest building on the edge of town. Patricia Morales turned out to be a woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair and eyes that assessed Lily with professional concern. She listened to their story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "The good news," Patricia said when they finished, "is that you have a strong case for a restraining order. The surveillance, the uninvited visits to the property, the history of control and verbal abuse, it's textbook harassment. The bad news is that restraining orders are only as good as the person's willingness to respect them. And from what you've told me about Marcus, respect for boundaries isn't his strong suit. So what do?" Lily asked. "We file anyway. We create a legal record. When Marcus violates the order, and he will, we document it. Each violation strengthens your case. Eventually, we build toward something more permanent." Patricia tapped her pen on the notepad. "But I need to be honest with you about something else. When that baby is born, Marcus can file for paternity and custody. If he's the biological father, he has legal rights, regardless of how you feel about him." Lily's face went pale. "You mean he could take my baby?" "Not necessarily, but he could demand custody hearings, visitation rights. He could make your life very difficult, especially if his family has the resources you say they do." "There has to be something we can do," Clay said. Patricia looked between them. "There is. The strongest protection would be if Lily had a stable living situation with a reliable support system. A place to live, a means of support. Someone who can testify to her character and fitness as a mother. If you were willing to formalize that arrangement somehow, it would strengthen her position significantly." "Formalize how?" Clay asked. "Well, the strongest option would be marriage. I'm not suggesting a romantic relationship necessarily, but a legal marriage would give Lily security, financial protection, and a much stronger position in any custody dispute. It would show stability, commitment." Lily shook her head. "Immediately. I can't ask Clay to do that. He's already done so much." "You're not asking. I'm offering the option." Patricia held up her hand. "Think about it. You don't need to decide today, but keep it in mind as we move forward." They filed the paperwork for the restraining order before leaving. On the drive back, neither of them spoke much. The weight of Patricia's suggestion hung in the air between them, impossible to ignore, but too big to address directly. It wasn't until they were almost home that Lily finally broke the silence. "You know you don't have to marry me, right?" "That's not why I came to you for help." Clay kept his eyes on the road. "I know that. I won't hold it against you if you want to back out now. This is getting complicated, and I understand if it's too much." "Lily." Clay pulled the truck over to the side of the road and turned to face her. I'm 60 years old. I've spent the last 20 years running from responsibility, telling myself I was too broken to be any good to anyone. Maybe I was. But you showing up in that cabin that changed something gave me a reason to be better than I've been. I'm not backing out. Not now, not ever. But marriage? That's huge. That's your whole life. My whole life was rodeo and regret. This would be something different. Something worth doing. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'm not saying we have to do it. I'm just saying, if it comes to it, if that's what it takes to keep you and that baby safe, then I'm willing. You think about it. We'll decide together. Lily wiped at her eyes. How did I get so lucky to end up in your cabin? I think we both got lucky, though neither of us probably saw it that way at the time. When they got back to the ranch, Clay noticed tire tracks in the fresh snow. Someone had been there while they were gone. His stomach tightened. He told Lily to wait in the truck while he checked the cabin. Everything inside looked undisturbed, but there was an envelope on the kitchen table that hadn't been there before. Clay picked it up carefully. His name was written on the front in neat, precise handwriting. He opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with a typed message. You're making a mistake. Lily belongs with me. The child belongs with me. I've tried to be reasonable, but you're forcing my hand. This is your last warning. Step aside or face the consequences. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. Clay brought the letter out to Lily. Her hands shook as she read it. He was in our home, she whispered. While we were gone, he was in our home. We'll give this to Patricia, add it to the evidence. And we're getting better locks. Today. Clay saw something shift in her expression, fear giving way to anger, tears giving way to determination. No more running, she said. No more hiding. If he wants a fight, we'll give him one. Lily, I mean it, Clay. I'm done being scared. I'm done letting him control my life. She turned to face him. If marrying you will help keep my baby safe, then let's do it. Not because we have to, but because it's smart. Because it's the right move. Clay studied her face. You're sure? I'm sure. We can go to the courthouse tomorrow, file the paperwork, make it legal before Marcus can file anything of his own. They went inside together. Clay started a fire while Lily made coffee, both of them moving around the cabin with practiced familiarity, a rhythm they'd developed over weeks of living together. It struck Clay that they already lived like family, like partners. Making it legal would just be putting words to something that already existed. That night, Clay sat up late, staring at the letter from Marcus. He'd faced down bulls that weighed a ton, riders who wanted to beat his record, his own demons in the bottom of a bottle. But this felt different. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves, about standing between a frightened woman and the man who wanted to control her. He thought about his grandfather, the man whose watch he carried, whose values he'd strayed so far from. What would the old man say about this situation? Clay knew the answer. He'd say, you do what's right, consequences be damned. You protect those who need protecting, you keep your word, and you don't back down from men who think might makes right. Clay folded the letter and put it in a folder with the other documents Patricia would need. Tomorrow, they'd drive back to Jackson. Tomorrow, they'd make this arrangement official. And tomorrow, they'd take the first real step toward building something Marcus couldn't tear down. In her room, Lily lay awake, one hand on her belly, feeling the baby move inside her. She thought about the marriage tomorrow, about the strange path that had brought her to this moment. She barely knew Clay Dawson, this broken-down cowboy who'd taken her in without question. But she trusted him more than she'd trusted anyone in years. The baby kicked hard, as if in agreement. We're going to be okay, Lily whispered to her unborn child. We found ourselves a good man, and we're going to fight for the life we deserve. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in white, covering Marcus's tire tracks and making the world look clean and new again. The wedding was as simple as weddings could be. They stood in the Jackson courthouse on a gray December morning, with Patricia Morales and her paralegal as witnesses. The judge was a woman in her 70s who asked them twice if they were sure, then pronounced them married, with the same enthusiasm she might have used to approve a parking permit. Clay slipped a simple gold band on Lily's finger. They'd bought it at a pawn shop on the way to the courthouse. Lily had nothing to give him in return, but Clay said it didn't matter. This wasn't that kind of marriage. Afterward, Patricia took them to lunch at a diner near her office. "Congratulations," she said, though her tone was more businesslike than celebratory. "This strengthens your position considerably. Now, when Marcus files his custody claim, and he will, you can present yourself as a stable married couple providing a home for the child." "When do you think he'll make his move?" Clay asked. "Soon. He's been quiet lately, which means he's planning something. Men like Marcus don't give up. They just change tactics." Patricia pulled out a folder from her briefcase. "Which brings me to something else. I did some digging into Marcus's background just to know what we're dealing with. His family does own a construction company, like Lily said. They're well-connected, politically active, they donate to the right campaigns. But I also found something interesting." She spread several documents on the table. Marcus was engaged once before, 4 years ago. The engagement ended abruptly. The woman filed a restraining order, then dropped it 3 weeks later and moved out of state. I tracked her down and called her yesterday. Lily leaned forward. "What did she say?" "She said Marcus's family paid her $50,000 to drop the restraining order and sign an NDA. She said if she'd stayed and fought, they would have buried her in legal fees and destroyed her reputation. She was a school teacher, couldn't afford to fight. So she took the money and ran." Clay felt anger burn in his chest. They bought her off. They tried to make the problem go away. And it worked. Patricia looked at Lily seriously. "They're going to try the same thing with you, except you're pregnant with their grandchild, which complicates things. They might offer you money to give them custody. Or they might try to prove you're an unfit mother and take the baby through the courts." "I won't give them my baby," Lily said, her voice shaking. "I don't care how much money they offer." "Good, because we're not going to let it get that far." Patricia collected her documents. "The restraining order should be approved within the week. That's our first line of defense. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. Any contact, any sighting, anything at all." They drove home in silence, Lily turning the wedding ring on her finger, Clay gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The marriage certificate sat in a folder on the seat between them, proof of their commitment or proof of their desperation, depending on how you looked at it. They were an hour from the ranch when Clay's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. "Mr. Dawson?" A woman's voice, professional and cautious. "My name is Jennifer Ellis. I'm a social worker with Wyoming Child Protective Services. I need to speak with you about a report we received." Clay's blood went cold. "What kind of report?" "A concerned citizen contacted us, claiming that you're harboring a mentally unstable pregnant woman at your property. They expressed concern for the welfare of the unborn child. I'm required to follow up on all such reports. I'd like to schedule a time to visit your home and conduct a welfare check." Clay pulled the truck over, his hands shaking with rage. "This is harassment. Someone is using your office to harass us. I understand you might feel that way, sir, but I'm obligated to investigate all reports. If there's nothing to be concerned about, the visit will be brief, and we can close the file. But if you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to escalate this to my supervisor." Clay looked at Lily. She'd gone pale, understanding immediately what was happening. Marcus had found a new angle of attack. "When do you want to come?" Clay asked, forcing his voice to stay level. "Would tomorrow afternoon work? Around 2 o'clock? Fine. We'll be here." He hung up and slammed his hand against the steering wheel. They're sending CPS. Marcus made a report, claimed you're unstable, that the baby's at risk. Lily wrapped her arms around herself. They're going to take my baby. Before it's even born, they're going to take it. No, they're not. We're married now. We have a lawyer. We have documentation that Marcus is harassing us. We'll show the social worker that you're fine, that you're getting medical care, that you have a safe place to live. You don't know how these things work. Once CPS gets involved, they can do whatever they want. They can decide I'm unfit based on anything, no job, no family, married to a man I barely know. They'll use it all against me. Clay reached over and took her hand. Then we show them the truth, that you're a strong woman who left an abusive situation, that you're taking care of yourself and your baby, that you have support and a plan for the future. That night, they stayed up late preparing for the visit. They cleaned the cabin until it gleamed. Lily organized the prenatal vitamins Dr. Chen had given her, the medical literature about pregnancy, every piece of evidence that showed she was taking her health seriously. Clay gathered the documents about Marcus, the threatening letter, the restraining order application, Patricia's notes about his history. At midnight, exhausted, they sat at the kitchen table with cups of tea. "I should tell you something," Lily said quietly, "something I haven't told anyone." Clay waited. "My mother's name was Sarah Dawson." She looked up at him. She was from Wyoming originally. Cheyenne. The world seemed to tilt. Clay stared at her, his mind racing. That's my ex-wife's name. Marie's maiden name was Sarah Dawson before we married." "I know. I didn't realize the connection at first. But when you told me about your daughter Emma, about your ex-wife Marie, I started to wonder. So I looked through some of my mother's old papers, things I've been carrying with me." She pulled out the photograph from her pocket and slid it across the table. Clay picked it up with shaking hands. The photo showed two women, young, maybe in their 20s, standing outside a house he recognized. His old house in Cheyenne. One of the women was Marie, unmistakably. The other looked like an older version of Lily. "They were cousins," Lily said. "My mother and your ex-wife. Which means Emma is your cousin. We're family." Clay couldn't breathe. All this time, he'd been helping a stranger, and she was family. Connected to the daughter he'd lost, connected to the life he'd destroyed. "I didn't know when I came here," Lily said quickly. "I didn't know this was your ranch. I remembered my mother talking about family in Wyoming, about a ranch in the mountains. I thought maybe if I could find it, I could find them, find someone who knew her. But by the time I realized who you were, I was already here, and I didn't know how to tell you." Clay set down the photograph, his hands trembling. "Does Emma know? Does she know about you?" "I don't think so. My mother and Marie lost touch after Marie's divorce. My mother died when I was 16. I ended up in foster care. I tried to find Marie once, but the last address I had was old. I never managed to track her down." Clay stood and walked to the window, trying to process everything. This changed everything. Lily wasn't just some woman he was helping. She was family, Emma's cousin, his responsibility in a way that went deeper than kindness or pity. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked. "Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd feel obligated to help me because of the family connection, not because you wanted to. Afraid it would make everything more complicated." Lily's voice broke. "I'm sorry. I should have told you from the beginning." Clay turned back to her. She looked small and frightened, waiting for his reaction. He thought about all the connections in life that seemed random but weren't, about how he'd found this ranch, how Lily had found him, how everything had led to this moment. "Emma needs to know," he said finally. "She needs to know you exist, that you're family. She won't care. She hasn't spoken to you in years. Maybe not. But she deserves to know anyway. And if something happens, if Marcus somehow manages to take your baby, Emma would want to know. Family protects family, even when that family is broken." They sat together in the quiet cabin, the photograph on the table between them. a connection to the past neither of them had expected to find. Outside, the first real blizzard of the season was beginning, wind howling through the trees, snow piling against the windows. Clay thought about calling Emma, about breaking years of silence to tell her about Lily. The idea terrified him, but it also felt right. Maybe this was the beginning of something, not redemption exactly, but a step toward it. "We'll get through the CPS visit tomorrow," Clay said. "We'll show them you're safe and cared for. And then we're going to reach out to Emma. Together. As family." Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Clay, for everything. For not being angry about the secret. We've all got secrets. What matters is what we do now, moving forward." They stayed up the rest of the night, talking about their mothers, about family, about the strange paths that had brought them together. And as the snow continued to fall, burying the world outside, inside the cabin, something was being built, not just a temporary arrangement between strangers, but a real family, forged from broken pieces and second chances. Jennifer Ellis arrived exactly at 2 o'clock, driving a state vehicle that looked painfully official parked next to Clay's battered truck. She was younger than Clay expected, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that held equal parts compassion and professional wariness. Clay and Lily met her at the door together, presenting a united front. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Jennifer said, her voice carefully neutral. "I know this must be stressful. I'll try to make this as quick and painless as possible." She spent an hour walking through the cabin, asking questions, taking notes. She looked at Lily's prenatal vitamins, the medical pamphlets from Dr. Chen, the clean, warm bedroom with the cradle Clay had built. She asked about Lily's plans for the birth, about their financial situation, about the nature of their relationship. Lily answered honestly, her voice steady despite her nervousness. She explained about leaving Marcus, about finding the cabin, about Clay's kindness. She showed Jennifer the threatening letter, explained about the restraining order they'd filed, about Patricia Morales and the legal steps they were taking. Jennifer listened without judgment, making careful notes. "And the marriage?" she asked. "It's very recent." "It is," Clay said, "but it's legal, and it's real. I'm committed to making sure Lily and her baby have a safe home." Jennifer looked between them, and Clay couldn't read her expression. Finally, she closed her notebook. "I'm going to be honest with you both. The person who filed this report painted a very different picture, claimed that Miss Harper was being manipulated, possibly held against her will by an older man who saw an opportunity to control a vulnerable young woman. Those are serious allegations." Lily's hands tightened on the arms of her chair. "That's not what's happening here. I can see that. You're clearly here by choice. You're receiving medical care. You have a support system and a plan. The cabin is clean, warm, safe. You seem mentally stable and capable of making your own decisions." Jennifer stood. "I'm going to file a report stating that I found no evidence of abuse or neglect and recommend that this case be closed. However, I should warn you that the person who filed the complaint may not be satisfied with that outcome. They may file additional reports or escalate to other agencies." "We understand," Clay said, "and we appreciate your fairness." After Jennifer left, Clay and Lily sat in silence for a long moment, the tension slowly draining from the room. "One crisis down," Lily said. "How many more do you think Marcus has planned?" "As many as it takes. But we handled this one. We'll handle the others." That evening, Clay sat at the kitchen table and did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He wrote a letter to Emma. The words came slowly, painfully. How did you explain 20 years of absence? How did you ask forgiveness from someone you'd failed so completely? In the end, he kept it simple. "Emma, I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you. I know I was a terrible father, that I chose rodeo and drinking over you and your mother, that I missed everything that mattered. I can't fix that. I can't undo those years. But I'm writing because something has happened that you need to know about. There's a young woman staying with me. Her name is Lily Harper. She's pregnant, alone, running from an abusive man. I've been helping her, giving her a place to stay, trying to keep her safe. Yesterday I learned that Lily is your cousin. Her mother Sarah was your mother Marie's cousin. She's family, Emma. Our family. Lily doesn't have anyone else. Her mother died when she was 16, and she's been on her own ever since. She needs family support now more than ever. I know you don't owe me anything, but this isn't about me. This is about Lily and her baby, and they deserve better than I can give them alone. If you're willing, I'd like you to meet her, or at least know that she exists, that you have family you didn't know about. If something happens to me, if Marcus somehow manages to hurt us or take the baby, I need to know that you'll look out for her. I understand if you don't want to respond to this. I understand if you want nothing to do with me or anything connected to me. But please, think about Lily. She's a good person who deserves a chance. Your father, Clay, he addressed the envelope to Emma's last known address, said a prayer that she still lived there, and drove into town the next morning to mail it. The whole drive back, he felt lighter somehow, as if writing the letter had lifted a weight he'd been carrying for years. When he got home, he found Sheriff Russo's patrol car in the driveway. His heart sank, but Russo was standing on the porch with Lily, both of them looking relaxed. "Sheriff," Clay said carefully, "everything all right?" "Just making a social call. Wanted to check in, see how you folks were doing after the CPS visit yesterday. Word travels fast. Small town. Jennifer Ellis is a friend. She mentioned she'd been out here, said everything looked fine." Russo glanced at Lily. "She also said someone has been filing a lot of complaints about you folks. Harassment complaints." "Marcus," Lily said quietly. "That's what I figured, which is why I wanted to give you a heads up. I got a call this morning from a private investigator working for the Brennan family. That's Marcus's last name, right? They wanted to know if I'd be willing to provide testimony about your mental state. Miss Dawson, sorry, Mrs. Dawson now, said they were concerned about the welfare of their grandchild." Clay felt his jaw tighten. "What did you tell them?" "Told them to go to hell in the politest way I could manage. But they're circling, getting ready for something. You should prepare yourselves." That night, Clay couldn't sleep. He walked the property in the dark, checking locks, looking for signs that someone had been there. The snow was deep now, which made it easier to spot tracks, but it also made the ranch feel isolated, cut off from help if they needed it. He was coming back from the barn when he saw headlights on the road below, moving slowly. A car, maybe two. They didn't turn up the driveway, just drove past, but Clay's instinct screamed warning. He went inside and woke Lily. "Someone's out there," he said quietly, watching the property. Lily got up, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. They stood at the window together, watching the road. Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, the headlights came back, moving in the opposite direction, still going slowly. "Reconnaissance," Clay said. "They're planning something." "What do we do?" Clay thought about it. "We call Patricia. We call Russo. We make sure people know what's happening, so if something goes wrong, there's a record." He made the calls. Patricia answered on the third ring, groggy but alert when she heard his voice. Russo was already awake, apparently used to late-night emergencies. "I'll drive out there," Russo said. "Patrol the area, see if I can spot them." "Thank you." "Clay, if this escalates, if they try something, you call me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself. I will." But Clay knew that if Marcus and his people came for Lily, if they tried to take her or the baby, calling the sheriff might not be enough. He'd have to be ready to protect them himself. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Clay recognized Emma's handwriting on the envelope immediately. His hands shook as he opened it. The letter was brief. "Dad, I got your letter. I don't know what to say about most of it. I'm not ready to forgive you, and I'm not sure I ever will be. But you're right that Lily deserves better than being alone. I did some research and confirmed that her mother, Sarah, was Mom's cousin. I have vague memories of her from when I was little. I'm not ready to see you, but I would like to talk to Lily, if she's willing. I'm including my phone number. Have her call me. And Dad, be careful. I looked into the Brennan family. They're dangerous people with a lot of resources. Don't underestimate them. Emma. Clay read the letter 3 times, each time catching on the word Dad. She'd called him Dad, not Clay or Mr. Dawson. It was something. Not forgiveness, maybe not even the beginning of forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. It was a door left slightly open. He showed the letter to Lily, who cried when she read it. She wants to talk to me, Lily said, wonder in her voice. I have a cousin. Real family. Call her. Tonight. Let her know you're okay. They made the call together. Clay standing close enough to offer support, but far enough to give Lily privacy. He couldn't hear Emma's side of the conversation, but he could see Lily's face light up, could hear the joy in her voice as she talked about her mother, about memories and family stories, and all the connections that had been lost and were now being found again. When Lily hung up, she was smiling through tears. She's amazing, Clay. She's strong and smart, and she actually cares about what happens to me. She said, if things get dangerous, I should come stay with her in Denver. She said she'd help however she can. Clay felt his throat tighten. That's good. That's real good. She asked about you, asked if you were treating me well. What did you tell her? I told her the truth, that you saved my life, that you're a good man who made mistakes but is trying to do better, that I trust you completely. Clay had to turn away, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name. For 20 years he'd believed he was beyond redemption, that the damage he'd done was permanent. But maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong. Maybe it was never too late to be the person you should have been all along. Outside, the wind picked up, howling around the cabin. The storm was coming, in more ways than one. But for the first time, Clay felt ready to face it. They had family now. They had allies. They had a plan. Let Marcus come. Let him bring his money and his lawyers and his private investigators. Clay Dawson had spent 60 years learning how to fall and get back up. This time, he wasn't getting back up alone. This time, he had something worth fighting for. The contractions started 3 weeks early, at 4 in the morning on a Tuesday in late January. Clay woke to the sound of Lily calling his name, her voice tight with pain and fear. He was at her door in seconds, pulling on clothes as he went. How far apart? Maybe 10 minutes. I don't know. Clay, it's too early. The baby's not supposed to come yet. Babies come when they're ready. We're going to be fine. He kept his voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. I'm calling Dr. Chen, then we're getting you to the clinic. But when he tried his phone, there was no signal. He went to the landline, dead. Clay looked out the window and saw why. The blizzard that had been threatening for days had finally arrived. Snow fell so thick he could barely see the barn. The phone lines must have come down. We can't get to town in this, Lily said, another contraction hitting her. She gripped the bed frame, breathing through the pain. Clay's mind raced through options. The clinic was 2 hours away in good weather. In this storm on these roads, it would be impossible. They were on their own. All right, he said, forcing himself to think clearly. We're going to do this here. I've delivered foals before, helped with carving. It's not that different. Clay, this is a human baby, I know. And you're strong, and we're going to get through this. He helped her back to bed, piled pillows behind her. I need to get supplies. Clean towels, warm water, anything we might need. Can you manage for a few minutes? Lily nodded, though her face was pale with fear. Clay moved through the cabin with purpose, gathering everything he could think of. Towels, blankets, a basin of warm water, the first aid kit, scissors that he sterilized in boiling water. He remembered enough from his ranch days to know the basics, but a human birth was different, higher stakes, more ways for things to go wrong. He was filling another pot with water when he heard an engine outside. His first thought was relief. Maybe Dr. Chen had somehow made it through the storm. But when he looked out the window, his blood went cold. It was Marcus's white sedan, followed by a dark SUV. Both vehicles pulled up in front of the cabin, parking to block the driveway. Marcus stepped out, along with two other men, big, professional-looking guys who had security written all over them. They walked toward the cabin with the confidence of people who believed they had every right to be there. Clay grabbed his rifle from the closet and positioned himself at the door. He didn't open it. "Lily's in labor," he shouted through the door. "This is the worst possible time for whatever you think you're doing. Leave now." Marcus's voice came back, muffled by the door and the wind. "That's my child being born in there. I have a right to be present. You have a restraining order. You're violating it by being here. The restraining order isn't finalized yet, and I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to make sure Lily and the baby receive proper medical care, which they clearly aren't getting in this cabin in the middle of a blizzard." Clay heard Lily cry out from the bedroom. "Another contraction." "We're handling it," Clay said. "We don't need your help. You're a 60-year-old rodeo bum playing doctor with a woman giving birth. You're going to get her killed, and my child with her." Marcus's voice hardened. "Now open this door, or my associates are going to open it for you." Clay looked back toward Lily's room, his mind calculating. He couldn't fight off 3 men, not while Lily was in labor and vulnerable. But he also couldn't let them in, couldn't let Marcus get to her while she was helpless. He heard one of the security guys say something to Marcus, heard footsteps moving around the side of the cabin toward the back door. Clay made a decision. He grabbed his phone, praying for even a single bar of signal. Nothing. But he had to try something. He fired a warning shot through the roof, loud enough to make the men outside pause, loud enough to maybe alert someone, anyone, that something was wrong at the Fletcher Ranch. "The next one won't be a warning," Clay shouted. "You're trespassing, you're threatening us, and I'm protecting my family." There was a moment of tense silence. Then Marcus spoke again, his voice colder than the winter wind. "Have it your way, old man. When that baby is born, when Lily realizes she can't do this without proper medical care, she's going to beg me to help. And when she does, I'll be right here, waiting." Clay heard them retreat to their vehicles, but they didn't leave. They were settling in, waiting, knowing that time was on their side. In the bedroom, Lily screamed. Clay set down the rifle and ran to her. She was crying, terrified, in the grip of a contraction that seemed to go on forever. "They're here," she gasped when it passed. "Marcus is here. I know, but he's not getting in. You focus on this baby, and I'll handle everything else." "Clay, I'm scared. What if something goes wrong? What if nothing's going wrong? You're doing great. The contractions are regular, which means your body knows what to do. We just need to trust it." Another contraction hit. Lily grabbed his hand so hard he thought she might break bones. He let her, anchoring her through the pain. Outside, Marcus and his men waited like vultures, patient and certain of their victory. The labor progressed through the long morning. Clay stayed at Lily's side, coaching her through contractions, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, telling her she was doing great, even when his own fear threatened to overwhelm him. He delivered foals and calves, but this was different. This was a person he cared about, bringing another person into the world under the worst possible circumstances. Between contractions, Lily would ask about Marcus, whether he was still outside. Clay would lie and say he didn't know, but they both heard the engines running periodically, keeping the vehicles warm. The men weren't leaving. Around noon, Clay heard something that made his heart leap. Another engine, heavier than the cars outside. He risked a glance out the window and saw Sheriff Russo's patrol SUV coming up the driveway, pushing through the snow, followed by Dr. Chen's four-wheel drive. Russo stopped his vehicle between the cabin and Marcus's cars. He got out, one hand on his weapon, and approached Marcus's sedan. Clay couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw Marcus gesturing angrily, saw Russo shake his head, saw one of the security guys start to step forward before Russo's hand moved to his gun. The man stepped back. After a tense few minutes, Marcus and his people got in their vehicles and left. Though they didn't go far, Clay could see them parked on the road about a quarter-mile away, still watching, still waiting. Dr. Chen ran to the cabin, her medical bag in hand. Clay let her in gratefully. "Thank God," he said. "How did you know?" "Sheriff Russo, he was doing his rounds when he heard a gunshot from this direction. Figured you might need help." She moved quickly to Lily's room, assessing the situation with practiced efficiency. "How far apart are the contractions?" "About 5 minutes," Lily gasped. "Is my baby going to be okay?" Dr. Chen checked her vital signs, examined her carefully. "Baby's heartbeat is strong. You're at about 7 centimeters. Everything looks normal for a slightly early delivery." "You're doing great, Lily." Sheriff Russo appeared in the doorway. "I moved those fellows down the road, but I can't make them leave the county. They're not technically violating the restraining order if they stay off your property." "They were trying to break in," Clay said. "They threatened us. Did you get it on video? Recording? Witnesses?" Clay shook his head, frustrated. "Then it's your word against theirs. But I'll file a report, add it to the documentation. Every bit helps." Russo looked at Lily with genuine concern. "You hang in. There, ma'am. You're in good hands with Dr. Chen." The afternoon wore on. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Lily's contractions grew stronger, closer together. Dr. Chen stayed calm and professional, guiding Lily through each stage, but Clay could see the worry in her eyes. Something wasn't quite right. "The baby's in a difficult position," Dr. Chen finally admitted. "Not breech, but not optimal either. Lily, I need you to listen to me very carefully. We can do this here, but you're going to have to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. Or we can try to get you to the hospital in Jackson, though in this weather and at this stage, I'm not sure we'd make it in time." Lily looked at Clay, fear and determination warring in her eyes. "Here. We do it here. I'm not giving Marcus any opportunity to interfere. This baby is being born in our home with people who love us." "All right," Dr. Chen said. "Then let's bring this baby into the world." The next hour was the longest of Clay's life. He held Lily's hand, supported her shoulders, whispered encouragement, even when she was too exhausted to respond. Dr. Chen worked with quiet competence. Russo stood guard at the door, and outside the storm raged on. And then, at 3:47 inches the afternoon, with a final tremendous push and a cry that seemed too loud for such a small creature, the baby was born. "It's a girl, Doctor," Chen said, tears in her eyes as she cleaned the infant and wrapped her in the blue blanket Lily had been knitting. A beautiful, healthy girl. She placed the baby in Lily's arms. Clay looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and perfect, and felt something break open in his chest. This was what mattered. This was what life was about, not rodeo buckles or whiskey bottles or running from your mistakes. This, new life, new chances, family. Lily was crying, laughing, holding her daughter with fierce protective love. "She's perfect. Clay, she's perfect." "She is," Clay whispered, touching one tiny hand with his calloused finger. The baby's fingers wrapped around his, gripping tight. Dr. Chen handled the medical necessities while Russo called in the birth. Everything was being documented, made official. This baby existed in the eyes of the law now. She had protectors, had a family, had people who would fight for her. Outside, Marcus's vehicles remained on the road, but they seemed less threatening somehow. What could he do now? The baby was born, healthy, documented. Lily was married, stable, surrounded by people who cared about her. As the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, Sheriff Russo finally received word that the roads were being cleared. Marcus's vehicles departed, heading back toward Jackson. "He'll be back," Russo said. "You know that, right? This isn't over." "Let him come," Clay said. "We'll be ready." Doctor Chen stayed the night, monitoring both Lily and the baby, making sure there were no complications. By morning, both were doing well. The baby, they decided to name her Hope, was nursing successfully. Lily was exhausted but glowing. Clay stood at the window, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold, holding his granddaughter because that's what she was, really, family by marriage and by choice. He thought about Emma, about calling her with the news that she was a cousin to this little girl, about building bridges instead of burning them. Sheriff Russo left after breakfast, promising to file a full report about Marcus's actions. "Doctor?" Chen departed shortly after, leaving detailed instructions about infant care and scheduling a follow-up visit. And then it was just the three of them, Clay, Lily, and Hope, in the quiet cabin, starting their life together as a family. Lily looked up from feeding the baby, her eyes soft with gratitude and something deeper. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything, for giving us a home, for protecting us, for being the family we needed." Clay shook his head. "You gave me more than I gave you. You gave me purpose again, a reason to be better than I was. What happens now?" "Now," Clay smiled, "now we raise this little girl, we build a life, we face whatever Marcus throws at us, together, and we do it as family." Outside, spring was still months away, but inside the cabin, something new was growing. Hope, love, and the quiet strength of people who'd found each other when they needed it most. Spring came to the Wyoming mountains like a promise kept. The snow melted slowly, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. The aspens budded. Birds returned to build nests in the eaves of the barn. And in the cabin by Copper Creek, a baby girl named Hope grew stronger every day. Marcus had tried. He'd filed for paternity testing, which proved he was Hope's biological father, and then immediately filed for custody. But Patricia Morales had been ready. She'd presented the court with documentation of his harassment, the restraining order, violations, witness testimony from Sheriff Russo and Dr. Chen about his behavior during the birth. She'd shown the judge that Lily had a stable home, a supportive spouse, and a clear pattern of responsible parenting. The judge had granted Marcus supervised visitation rights, 2 hours every other week at a neutral location with a court-appointed supervisor present. It wasn't what Marcus wanted, but it was something. And more importantly, it established clear legal boundaries that he couldn't cross without consequences. Marcus had taken his limited victory and retreated, at least for now. His lawyers were appealing, but Patricia was confident. "The system's not perfect," she'd told Clay and Lily. "But sometimes it works the way it's supposed to. You've got the stronger case," and the judge could see that. On a Saturday morning in early April, Clay stood on the porch, watching a car come up the driveway. He recognized the rental sedan. He'd seen the confirmation email when Emma had sent it, asking if it was okay to visit. The car stopped. The driver's door opened, and there she was, Emma. She looked like Marie, but with Clay's eyes and stubborn jaw. She was 37 now, a woman Clay barely knew, but she was his daughter. She walked toward the porch slowly, nervously, carrying a bag of what looked like baby gifts. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. Clay's throat closed. He managed to say, "Emma, thank you for coming." They stood there awkwardly, 20 years of silence between them, until the cabin door opened and Lily emerged, carrying Hope. "Emma," Lily said, "I'm so glad you're here." Emma's face softened when she saw the baby. "Is this Hope?" "It is. Would you like to hold her?" Emma took the baby carefully, and Clay watched his daughter's expression transform as she looked down at her cousin's child. "She's beautiful," Emma whispered. They spent the day together, the four of them. Emma and Lily talked about their mothers, about family history, about the connections they'd discovered. Clay stayed mostly quiet, watching his daughter interact with this new family, seeing her laugh and relax in ways he'd never seen before. In the late afternoon, while Lily was napping and Emma was rocking Hope, Clay finally found the courage to speak. "I know I can't fix what I did," he said. "I know saying sorry doesn't cover 20 years of being absent. But I am sorry, Emma. Sorrier than I know how to say." Emma didn't look at him, just kept rocking the baby. "I was so angry at you for so long. I blamed you for everything that went wrong in my life. But then I got older, and I realized that blaming you was easier than dealing with my own problems. You had every right to be angry. Maybe, but carrying that anger around it was exhausting. When I got your letter, when you asked me to help Lily, it was the first time you'd ever put someone else first. The first time you'd ever asked me to do something that wasn't about you." She looked up at him. "I think that's why I came. Because I wanted to see if it was real. If you'd actually changed." "Have I?" Emma considered. "I think you're trying. I think you found something worth changing for." She looked down at Hope. "I'm not ready to have a normal father-daughter relationship. I don't know if I ever will be. But I think I can have a relationship with you as Lily's husband, as Hope's grandfather, as part of this family we're building." Clay felt tears on his face and didn't bother wiping them away. "That's more than I deserve, probably, but it's what I'm offering." That evening, Clay took a photograph. The four of them himself, Lily, Emma, and Hope, standing on the porch of the cabin with the mountains behind them. 4 people who'd been broken in different ways, who'd found each other through circumstances that seemed random but weren't. 4 people who were choosing to be family. He would frame that photograph and hang it in the cabin, a reminder of what mattered, not the past. He couldn't change, but the future he could help build. After Emma left, promising to visit again in a few weeks, Clay and Lily sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Hope slept in Lily's arms, peaceful and content. "You know," Lily said, "when I first came here, I thought I was just looking for a place to hide, somewhere to wait out the storm until I could run again. And now I know I wasn't looking for a place. I was looking for home. And I found it." Clay reached over and took her hand, not as strangers sharing a cabin, not as 2 broken people making do, but as family, as partners, as 2 people who'd given each other exactly what they needed when they needed it most. "We both did," he said. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and new grass. In the barn, the cradle Clay had built sat waiting for when Hope would be old enough to use it. In the cabin, the rooms that had been empty and cold for so long were filled with life and laughter and the small sounds of a baby learning to exist in the world. Clay thought about his grandfather's watch, still in his pocket, about the passage of time and the choices that defined a life. He'd wasted so many years running from responsibility, from connection, from anything that required him to be better than he was. But in the end, it had led him here, to this porch, this family, this moment of quiet contentment as the sun set over the mountains. Maybe that was what redemption looked like. Not a grand gesture or a single moment of heroism, but a series of small choices to do better, to show up, to love the people who needed you. Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. Hope stirred in her sleep and settled again. And Clay Dawson, 60 years old and finally home, allowed himself to believe that he'd done something right at last. The broke cowboy who'd bought an abandoned ranch had found more than a place to live out his days. He'd found a reason to live them fully. And in a world that often felt short on second chances, that was more than enough. It was everything.